This is the first of 3 videos where I'm going to talk about functions, the graphs of functions, that is. In this video, we're going to talk about what a function is and the zeros of a function, which is a really important concept, shows up a ton. Second video, parabolas, most common function, every test, key skill. Third video, shifts and translations, really important topic too. These are 3 videos I wouldn't really skip. Now, they're closely tied in with the intermediate algebra function stuff, so you may want to check out those videos. Although in those videos, I focus more on the plug-in nature of the algebra function problems. So what is a function? Well, like I mentioned, parabolas are the ones you deal with most. As far as what you think about as functions, the function you're actually going to deal with the most on test day is a line. All lines except for vertical lines, I'm going to make this vertical, are functions. Similarly, parabolas, as long as they open up and down, or either open up or down, cup or umbrella, are functions. Absolute value, function. Square root, function. Cubic, function. What do all these things have in common? Well, in the algebra videos, I talked about how x is an input, right? X is an input and y is the output. Plug in x, spit out y. Boom, boom. Input, output, x, y. So what a function is it's an equation that has a graph where there will only be one output per input. So for this x value, there's only one point. For this x value, there's only one y point. So on and so forth. Same is true here. Only one y value per x input. Here as well, same deal. And of course, here's y. And on the cubic as well. What aren't functions? Well, I mentioned the sideways parabola indirectly. So a sideways parabola is not a function. Why? Well, because if I put in an x value, I'm going to run into the graph twice. That's what's called the vertical line test, and you're probably very familiar with it. Zeros of functions are really the meat of what's important here. So the functions you'll see on test day, you will see parabolas, you will see lines, you may see cubics, you may see absolute value functions, you maybe could see a square root. You could even see a 4th or 5th power function. But typically when you see those atypical functions, everything from square root to cubic to higher power functions, what they're really going to do is ask you how many zeros there are. One way they do that is they give you a graph. And they say, well, how many zeros are there? A zero of a function is how many times it crosses the x-axis. That's a real zero, okay? So some functions have zeros, some functions don't. All lines have 1 0 unless it's a horizontal line. Parabolas can have 2 zeros, 1, 2, 1 0, where the vertex, just that very end point, touches the x-axis. Or they can have 0 zeros, right? If it opens above it, or if it's downward facing, opens below it. Square roots can have 1 or 0, depending on if it's shifted up or down. Absolute value could have 1 or 2. Cubics will have 3. Well, usually. They could also have 2 or 1. So on and so forth. So in general, what do you need to know? That's the gist of it. And when y is 0, you have a function. If you can make y 0, you don't have a function, you have a real number 0. If you can make y 0 and come out with a solution to an equation, it has a 0. If the graph crosses the x-axis, it has a 0. So the question is, which of the following functions have no real zeros? So one way you could do this, which I think is the silly way, is to go to your stat plot in your graphing calculator and put all these in. That's really long. And I don't think a very good idea. Second way you could do it is know your functions, shift, and translations, which I think is a great idea. I have a whole video on that. It's a huge time saver, huge help, and it's a great way to get more questions right, because some questions, you really kind of need to know that. Third way to do it, which I think is pretty good too, is say, well, can I make y 0 and get a real number result? Okay, so let's run through these. Now this is a which question, W-H-I-C-H. You see a which question, you think automatically marking off. And I've used this example in the videos before, but I'm going to use it again. If I ask you which jacket you like, you got to be able to look at the jackets. Okay, so which of the following functions have no real zeros? So to test that algebraically, I'm going to set y equal to 0. Why 0? Well, for it to cross the x-axis is when y is equal to 0. So I set y equal to 0 and then I solve. 1, so I add 1 to both sides. 1 equals x squared. Well, the square root of 1 is 1 and negative 1, so those are two real numbers, 0. So I'll actually have 2 on that one. Y equals x minus 1. Well, that's a line and it's not horizontal, so automatically you should be able to tell that it does. But let's go ahead and plug in 0. 0 equals x minus 1. Move that 1 over, add 1 to both sides. X equals 1. The 0 of that one is 1. Y equals x squared plus 1. Okay, 0 equals x squared plus 1. So move the 1 over, I'm going to have negative 1 equals x squared. Uh-oh. I can't have real number square roots of negative numbers. That's the whole reason I exist. Check out the video on complex numbers for more on I. So can't have real number square roots of negative numbers. The real number square root of the square root of negative 1 is I. I equals x. Well, that's not real number square root. So I can stop there. A and B had real number square roots. C does not. Now, a couple things. Remember, whenever you're marking off, you're trying to prove things wrong. You want to prove answer choices wrong. Eliminate the impossible. Whatever you're left with is right. Thank you, Sherlock Holmes. For practice, if you're just getting started, if you're not putting the final touches on it, I would go ahead and go through D and E as well. Don't stop. And if you're ever uncertain, you think that you have the right answer, but you're not sure, run through all your answer choices. Confidence is really important. So let's just take a quick look at D and E. 0 is equal to x cubed. Well, the cube root of 0 will be 0. So that has a real number 0. 0 is the real number 0. Y equals x squared. Oops. Well, that'll be x squared. 0 is equal to the square root of x. Square both sides to get rid of my radical. X is equal to 0 as well. So E is out. That's all you need to do on these. They're great mark-off questions. So make sure you watch the second two videos. Really strongly encourage that and really work through these problems in the book. Very, very helpful. These are typically higher number problems, 30 plus. They're great points to get.